Last minute prep.
Good evening. Welcome to the Thursday, March 23rd, 2017, closed session of the Board of Directors of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District. I'm Board President Rochelle Sherris-Watt, and I will take roll. Director Welsh?
Here.
Director Hassai?
Here.
Vice President Natoli?
Here.
Unfortunately, Director Cordova continues to have some medical condition issues and will not be able to join us this evening. All right, we will entertain public comments on matters referring to the closed session. As there are none, we will adjourn into closed session and return to open session at 7:30 p.m. Thank you. I know. We're not as popular as we used to be.
Probably a good thing.
Good evening. Welcome to the March 23rd, 2017 open session of the Board of Directors of the Kensington Police Protection and Community Services District. I am Board President Rochelle Sherris-Watt, and I will take roll call. Director Hassai?
Here.
Director Welsh?
Here.
Vice President Natoli?
Here.
Unfortunately, Director Cordova will not be able to join us this evening due to health concerns. The board met for closed session, and what we can report out, we tabled items A and B, and we discussed public employee employment. Item C, the board has received resumes for possible candidates for a general manager or interim general management position with the district, and we will begin analyzing the information we have received and possibly scheduling a closed session to conduct interviews. We will now move on to the open session, public comments concerning items not on the agenda this evening.
Okay, I always wanted to be number one. I guess I finally made it because Mabel was nice and said, you go first. Good evening.
Always been number one in my book.
Yeah, sure, I have. I've been number one in a lot of people's book. I'm Carl Kruger. I would like to encourage the board to develop a timeline so we get the contract with our officers done on time this go-around. I know you have a lot of things that are going at this point, but to develop a timeline and pass it on to the people who negotiate for the officers. And if we don't get it done in time, then don't let it be our fault. We are the employer. We ought to be sure that we do it in a timely manner. Thank you.
I don't think I'll need the time that Carl just donated to me. I'm Mabry Benson. I just want to say I'm bothered by some aspects of our agenda packets. First, this is a very small point. In the board homepage, this meeting was described as a special meeting. That was confusing to me until I read the actual agenda. Yes, the closed session was special, but maybe I don't think that's really quite right either. Okay, and the open session was listed as regular. Please refer to both the monthly Thursday meetings as regular meetings in the announcement. It just a little clearer. And I was thinking, I have to make another day this week. Okay, and there's no additional more importantly, there's no additional documentation for the dispatch issue. There should have been the revised fiscal summary sheet that was passed out at the March 9th meeting. There were letters from the sheriff and El Cerrito Police Department in the finance agenda packet, not in the regular meeting packet. And I understand there was a letter from Albany, not in the finance agenda packet, but presented at the meeting. It particularly should have been included for this packet, as well as any other letters from those departments on this matter. And then another point about the March 22nd finance agenda, a page or pages, who knows, are missing from the letter from the sheriff. See packet page 18 and 19. It starts detailing options for RMS and starts with one, and then we don't hear anymore, and it's not, it doesn't flow right. So clearly some pages were missing on that finance agenda. Okay, thank you.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Linda Lipscomb, Kensington resident. I wanted to take the time to all present to congratulate Officer Barrow on his arrest of a very violent person. I hope that the members of the community and this board, to the extent there has been criticism of this officer in the past, will take the same vigor in congratulating him and recognizing him for the expertise that he has provided us as a community. I've known him for many years. Officer Barrow, knew him as Sergeant Barrow. I understand he was, now is Officer Barrow. And he has many talents, and he is an officer that I am proud to have on this force, and I feel very, very safe with. Thank you.
Pardon? Yes.
Excuse me, just as a point of clarification, there were two officers on that scene. One was Detective Martinez and Officer Barrow. And yes, I do agree with Linda Lipscomb that it was Officer Barrow's expertise and experience that was able to bring that case to a close without having the chief having to respond back into work after making it home after the finance meeting.
Thank you, Chief. I didn't mean to slight Detective Martinez. Certainly, I knew that he was involved from the press release on that. What I meant was specifically that in view of past statements concerning the officer, I knew that he is a good man to have on our team, and I wanted that to be recognized, as I say, with the same vigor and strength that was applied negatively in the past. Thank you.
All right, if there are no, oh, excuse me, Mr. Liddell?
Good evening, Peter Liddell. This isn't so much a comment as kind of a show and tell. We've been talking, various folks around here, about exterior lighting for this building. And many people have probably installed these already. These are solar-powered lights. They have a motion detector on them, so they only turn on when someone is nearby. They're very convenient. You can put them anywhere because you don't need to plug them in. And these are $15 a piece on Amazon. You can get them in different configurations and different prices. But if you are thinking about external lighting, you might want to consider something like this. That's it. Thank you.
All right, if we have no further public comments, I'll move on to board and staff comments. Board members?
Yeah, I have a couple. First of all, I wanted to say that I meant to get an item on the agenda for this meeting, but I blew it. So I want to tell people that I will be asking to have an item put on for the next regular meeting, which is to amend the duty statement for the chief of police. In the duty statement for the general manager, there's a line there about part of the duty being to engage with the community, and there isn't an equivalent in the chief of police statement. So I just wanted to let people know that I'll be asking to have that duty statement for the chief of police have the same kind of provision about engaging with the public. Actually, Jim Watt at the Finance Committee last night expressed an interest. Jim and it's one other person too, I think, or two people were saying this, I can't remember the second, but asking for a little bit more explanation particularly for new items, I think, on the agenda, if we can sort of either give advance notice or give a statement with the agenda item explaining why that item is there. I thought that was a good suggestion, and that's actually part of what motivated me to tell people now that I'm going to be putting an item on the agenda next time around for the amendment of the duty statement for the chief. Secondly, we have not yet had a Park Grounds Committee subcommittee meeting. I'm going to try to set one for next week. Unfortunately, I can't announce the date tonight because I don't know what my schedule is next week for my work. But please look to the website. It's probably going to be Wednesday or Thursday next week, and we'll get a notice up there more than 24 hours in advance. We only have a couple committee members named so far, as I remember. There was Katie Gluck and Peter and Charlie Daniels, I think those three. If anybody is interested in becoming a member of the committee, please just show up to that meeting and ask, and we'll see what we can do. Okay, that's it. The question is, will I describe what the committee does? That was from Mabry Benson. Basically, there are two park-related committees, the Park Building Committee and the Park Grounds Committee, and
Park building is now called Park Planning and Recreation and
Sorry about
includes
that.
the park building.
and so there's a little bit of an overlap with the recreation part, so where there's an overlap, I'm sure we'll collaborate. But basically, the grounds committee is for anything involving the grounds that can't be managed by the chief of police general manager or should be managed by that person with input from the community, or is sort of not something that's really within the chief general manager's purview, but something the community, or at least not in it yet, something the community's interested in and wants to develop. Best example of that is the work that's been going on now for 2 years, where a group of volunteers has been clearing out ground brush and low-hanging tree limbs and bushes that can serve as natural fuel for fires to perpetuate them should there be a fire in the area. Most of the work is centered on protecting this building from a fire, but there's, you know, in general, protecting the park and not and keeping to a minimum the potential for park vegetation to perpetuate a flame in any particular direction. We also have a little issue that we've talked about before with serpentine rock. There's a little bit of an outcropping. You can spot it right away. When you walk out there, it's fenced in right now with kind of orange-colored fencing to mark the area, but the ground itself is kind of an ugly gray, and it's very distinct from everything else around because nothing's growing on it. Particularly in wet weather like this, when everything's green, it really sticks out. That's got a little bit of asbestos in it, 1% to 2%, according to a couple samples that we took several months ago. And we're in the process, the chief and I are in the process right now of looking for a good asbestos consultant to tell us how to manage that potential hazard. But this is something the Park Grounds Committee might want to weigh in on as well once we get some recommendations from that expert. Does that help, Mabry? You're welcome. Okay.
Any other comments? I would like to thank my fellow board members. I had to unexpectedly go out of town last week for a funeral, and deficiencies in the agenda should be mine. Hotel Wi-Fi is not all it's cracked up to be, so I apologize, and I thank them for stepping in and chairing meetings and doing more than their fair share of work. So I appreciate that. Staff comments?
No.
Did you want to say something about the arrest? Did we, 'cause I know it was referred to by Linda Lipscomb's comment, but I'm not sure people know the details of what happened.
Yeah, I'll make a quick comment about the arrest. There was a individual that was arrested for DUI and domestic violence, to include a list of other charges that occurred last night, right around the time we were concluding our Finance Committee meeting. The issues surrounding that particular incident were handled by Detective Martinez and Officer Barrow. And like I stated earlier, I agree with Ms. Lipscomb that Officer Barrow did a wonderful job, and his experience came to play. I filled the details in as I was just about home in Solano County and thought that I would have to turn around and come back, but I did not have to, because those two officers were able to handle all those moving parts with some assistance from El Cerrito PD.
There is a press
Thank you.
release on the district website with details. Sorry. There is information on the district website. There's a press release about the incident.
All right, we move to old business. The board is going to receive an update from Chief Hull on our ongoing discussions concerning the need for dispatch, RMS, and records management services to the district. Would you like to begin?
Yes, everyone, there were some forms that I placed on the back table. If you grab one of those, it's titled CAD RMS Transition 3/22/2007. The talks that I've been speaking with both Albany PD and El Cerrito PD and the Sheriff's Department. El Cerrito PD and the Sheriff's Department are kind of combined. Information has been coming in as late as the 22nd of March. So I had to update some of the information, and what I attempted to do is put it in a narrative form, because it was explained to me that some people were getting a little bit confused by the chart that we had up. So I was hoping to make this a little bit easier to read and easier to understand, and I emphasized some of the totals in bold. So you will see some of the aspects, the elements that are being taken into account to come to those numbers. What's driving the two main concerns for the decision to either contract out with Albany or El Cerrito and the Sheriff's Department are budgetary concerns as far as costs, and then officer safety. All this is being driven by the fact that the Richmond Police Department has decided to implement a new formula and how they were going to charge agencies that they were providing these services for the last maybe 19 years. That formula ended up raising the costs to the point to where all the other agencies decided that they were going to leave the Richmond Police Department to either form their own consortium or to go to the Sheriff's Department. And that's where the District of Kensington found ourselves. So I limited the options back down to the two cities that are contiguous to our borders. That's El Cerrito and Albany. Considering the cost, if you would take a look at the document that I put up, you will find that the initial cost for the Albany Police Department is more expensive than the initial cost with going with the Sheriff's Department and El Cerrito. The issue that I had to take in concern in relation to those costs are the fact that Albany intends to stay with its software vendor going into the future. We know that there will be a new software vendor for the El Cerrito Sheriff's Department option. El Cerrito and Kensington currently use the same software vendor because we were both a member of the Richmond Police Department Consortium. Our contract expires in 2018. The El Cerrito contract expires in 2019. El Cerrito plans to remain with this current software vendor until their contract expires, at which point they plan on going out to the market and seeing what's available at that point, to where they plan on leaving the current vendor and obtaining a new one. What that entails is this: we will have to pay a total of $170,000 today to go online with the El Cerrito Police Department and the Sheriff's Department, and then wait 2 years to potentially have to pay another 100 or 150, or that price is really unknown at this time because we don't know what vendor they will get, but could potentially pay at this price again, as opposed to paying the higher upfront price, as you will see that it costs to go with Albany, and then remain in that environment into the future. Unknown how long that will be. I asked the question, and the Albany chief expressed that he had no intentions of ever leaving the current vendor that he has right now. Another major factor or other considerations into this, if you would go to the second page, you will see that on the bottom of the page there's a section called Services. What I tried to show here is, prior to Richmond Police Department creating this new environment that precipitated other agencies leaving that consortium, they provided 24-hour services for Records Department. They provided CAD RMS. They provided IT services. So we kind of got a full packet with them prior to them deciding to create a new environment. Now, if you compare the services with Albany and El Cerrito and the Sheriff's Department, which is listed here, Albany pretty much provides the type of services that we were getting from Richmond. They will provide 24 hours, 7 days a week CAD RMS. They will also provide IT services for mobile units on both ends of the system. And that's pretty important, because normally the IT services will stop on their end, and then we have to figure it out for ourselves on our end. If you look down at the El Cerrito Police Department section, their records department closes at night. So that becomes an issue for us, because if we have one police officer working at night and there is an incident that happens, and yes, it doesn't happen a lot, but when it happens, you need the service to be able to comply with some state mandates about getting information entered into the CLETS DOJ system. For example, a missing person at risk or a missing juvenile. So when that happens, under the Albany system, where we're being offered 24-hour services, the officer on scene simply has to pick up his cell phone, relate the necessary information to the records clerk or the dispatcher who will be making the entries into the CLETS system, and still remain on scene to conduct his preliminary investigation. It can get a little bit complicated when we're talking about the El Cerrito and the Sheriff's Department. If you look at the Sheriff's Department section there, it says dispatch only. That's the only thing they want to do. They don't want to provide any RMS services, which is the computer record services, and they don't want to provide any records department services, which is your brick and mortar building with a records clerk. They did express, though, that in exigent circumstances, if it was an emergency, they would make an exception and do those duties. But I suspect how many times that's going to occur before they say they're not doing it again, as opposed to Albany, who's offering these services up front. Going forward, and if you look at the annual payments between the two, yes, you will find that the Albany annual payment is a slightly higher than the annual payment with the Sheriff's Department and El Cerrito PD. But then again, I will say that the services that are being offered for Albany is worth the extra payment. There is a set of footnotes in the back. There's 4 footnotes in the back that will help clarify some of the things in the narrative. If you're looking at sections where it says "see note," they're on the very back pages. Yes, this did not make it into the agenda. As you will see, we met with the Albany Police Chief on the 22nd. So there are new information constantly coming in, and as that information comes in, it will affect some of the information that's being presented. One of the things that was pointed out was there was a difference between the numbers that we're showing here and the earlier numbers that were shown on the chart. For those of you who attended the meeting, it was cast on the wall. One of the things we didn't know at that time was that the El Cerrito Police Department has since informed us that they would be willing to absorb some of the costs to get online with the Tiburon system. And if you look, you'll see the total Tiburon cost was about $107,000. And with the cost savings that we would have had for El Cerrito to absorb some of those costs, I think it came out to about $68,000 or $69,000. When it comes to the issue of contracts, if we go with the El Cerrito Sheriff's Department option, we will have a total of 4 contracts. We're going to have a contract with the Sheriff's Department, a contract with the El Cerrito Police Department, a contract with the Tiburon vendor, which is the software the Sheriff's Department uses, and then there's a contract with our current vendor called New World. Our contract with New World is due to end in August of 2018. The El Cerrito contract with New World is due to end in 2019. We would have to extend our contract and pay that fee for 1 extra year. If we go to the Albany option, we will have a total of 2 contracts. You have 1 contract with the Albany Police Department, and then you have a second contract with the software vendor, which is RIMS. In my estimation, some people think that the 4 contracts and whatever complexity that might bring isn't a big deal. I'm a person who likes simplicity. So based on all the information that I've gathered, and I've tried to present in a fairly easy to understand narrative format on this form, I am going to make a recommendation for the board to consider contracting with the Albany Police Department instead of the Sheriff's Department, El Cerrito Police Department option.
Thank you. I believe that we want to take public comment, but I think things that we are interested in discussing especially are the length of the contract. I've had the pleasure to sit in on about half of the meetings that Vice President Natoli and Chief Hull sat through, so I appreciate them for their time and intense analysis of the situation. And there are a few differing recommendations and suggestions for the length of the contract, as well as, of course, establishing which agency the board would like to go to. We do have the possibility of having a month-to-month extension with Richmond, but only until September of 2017, because at that point, they are changing their software, and we will have to be on our own system. So the situation, while not absolutely dire, does need to be in motion as soon as possible. Want to take public comment? Please, Larry.
Hi, my name is Larry Nagel, and I'm one of the directors of the Kensington Fire Protection District. And my concern is simply whether this new arrangement is going to be an impediment to the, most of our mutual aid is with El Cerrito, as I understand. I've never seen an Albany police car up here. And I'm wondering, is this, do you foresee any problems with the Kensington Police Department talking to the Kensington Fire Department and the Kensington Police Department talking to the El Cerrito Police Department? And in terms of dispatching, my understanding is that the 911 call will go to one dispatcher, and then the medical and fire emergencies will have to be transferred to another dispatcher, because the Kensington Fire Department will continue to use the El Cerrito dispatching. So I wondered if there's any problems involved with that. I'm not terribly interested about length of contract or costs, but I am interested. I want to make sure that our fire personnel and our police personnel can continue to talk to each other.
Well, let me answer your first part of your question first. One of the reasons why you have seen the El Cerrito Police Department in Kensington more than Albany Police Department is because currently we're on the same radio channel. So we had a consortium, and we were El Cerrito, San Pablo, and Kensington. We were all sharing a radio channel out of the Richmond Police Department Dispatch Center. That if we dispatch with Albany, then Kensington will be on the same radio channel with Albany, and then you will see Albany patrol cars in Kensington more than you'll see the El Cerrito patrol cars. Now, as far as communication between the Kensington Police Department and the Kensington Fire Department, under the new environment, both law enforcement dispatch centers will be in two different buildings, or a different building than from the dispatch center for the fire department. The Sheriff's Department will dispatch the El Cerrito Police Department. Con Fire will dispatch the El Cerrito Fire Department. As it currently stands, if a resident were to pick up a phone, dial 911 for a fire emergency call, in the new environment, when a resident picks up their phone to dial 911 for a medical emergency or a fire emergency call, that call is going to first be picked up by the dispatcher of the Sheriff's Department, which is going to be the dispatcher for the Police Department Patrol Unit. Once that dispatcher determines that it is a fire-related call, that call would then have to be switched over to the Con Fire dispatcher, who will then produce a fire call and dispatch the El Cerrito Fire Department. This process will be exactly the same if we were to dispatch with the Albany Police Department. The Kensington resident will pick up the phone, dial 911 for a fire-related call. The call will go into the Albany Police Department dispatch, which would be dispatching the Kensington police units. The Albany dispatcher will make the determination that it is a fire call, get the necessary information, and then transfer that call to Con Fire, who will then get the information and send the El Cerrito Fire Department. So either option that we go to, there will still have to be the one call will still have to be switched to the fire dispatcher. Now to the other part of your question concerning the communication between the Kensington Fire Department and the Kensington Police Department and the El Cerrito Police Department. Currently, right now, there's a radio system called eBricks. And what eBricks allows us to do, the radios that you see on the officer's hip has 12 channels. So he's able to monitor dispatch from the fire department. He's able to monitor dispatch from Oakland Police Department, the Berkeley Police Department, the Albany Fire Department, some county departments. So what we have the ability to do is to monitor all these other agencies. However, we cannot use those agencies for dispatch services. So there will be no more difficulty in Kensington being able to communicate with El Cerrito than it is right now with Kensington being able to communicate with Albany. It's just a matter of switching a channel on your radio. And in the moments that those happens, it's normally when the officer's in the patrol car, because you have the radio in the patrol car, you have the radio on your hip. You always want to be monitoring your main channel. So you can have your patrol car on your main channel, have your hip radio on any channel the officer chooses to monitor. And that's how communication is done. If there was an emergency, you can be on another channel and speak up. The dispatcher will take your call. If you're on the wrong channel and you accidentally queue up the mic for a routine police-related call, the dispatcher will automatically and immediately tell you you're on the wrong channel and tell you what channel that you're on, and go find your own channel.
Larry, Wyoming says hello.
Any more public comment?
Yes, good evening, Jim Watt. Well, we had a rather robust discussion last night about this topic. And we came to a conclusion as a finance committee, which hasn't been referenced here tonight. That was that it was the opinion of the finance committee, and it was recommended to the board that the board consider entering into a contract with the Albany Police Department to provide dispatch services, with the condition that that contract could be terminated at the end of the second year or sometime thereafter, assuming it might be a 5-year contract, with the further condition that that Kensington would provide 180 days prior notice. So basically, at a year and a half, we could, if we wanted to, terminate this contract. Now, some of you may wonder, why would we even want to do that? And why, by the way, right now, all we have, and I understand there have been discussions that have taken place with the town of Albany and the Albany Police Chief. However, none of us, except for those that were party to those discussions, are familiar with the questions and the answers to those questions. So we have to rely upon a letter that was issued by the Chief of Police for Albany, which indicated that he was looking for a 5-year contract. And so as a consequence of that, as I just indicated to you, the Finance Committee recommended that we have that provision that we could terminate at the end of the second year. And it wasn't an option, it wasn't that we would use our best efforts to do that. The way in which we phrased this was that we were going to request that you, the board, direct the chief to enter into negotiations to do precisely that, not to use his best efforts to accomplish that. If for some reason he is unable to do that, then based upon what the Finance Committee was recommending, I would think that that would have to come back to the Finance Committee for further discussions in the event that the Chief of Albany believes that that is not appropriate. Now, I can give you several reasons why and I would like to give you several reasons why I believe that shortening this contract term is very important. So I'll start out with one of the ones that I think is fundamentally important, particularly for our 2 new board members. And that is that a number of us in the community voted for you people to be on this board because we wanted to at least go through the effort of looking at outsourcing. And if in fact we enter into a 5-year unbreakable contract with the City of Albany, that would significantly tie our hands with respect to any other potential options that we might have with perhaps negotiating with outsourcing with the City of El Cerrito. That's point number one. The other thing that, I have several other points, and these didn't come up in our meeting because, like most things that I do, I usually get my best thoughts right in the middle of the night. So I come up with a few more questions for the chief, well, either for the chief or asking the chief to get further clarification. And the first one is that, and you've more or less alluded to this, Chief, which is, in the event that we go with Albany, we will be on the same radio frequency with Albany. And as you just indicated, that means that when we need assistance, and you just illustrated an example of that with the incident that occurred last night, where apparently the El Cerrito police came to your assistance, it will be the Albany police that are the most likely party to respond. Am I correct in that? Yes, okay. Because they're on the same channel, and they will be listening to the talk back and forth between these two communities. So my question to you is, how do you feel, given the fact that our contiguous boundary with the City of El Cerrito is significantly, without question, greater than it is with the City of Albany? And as I was just driving through Albany on my way to do some Uber work that I take a responsibility for every day, I realized that if I'm out on the outskirts of Albany, I've got a pretty good drive to get back to where I live on Grizzly Peak, or for that matter, up at the upper end of Arlington, versus the potential response time for an El Cerrito patrolman. And I realize that there is the ability to call in El Cerrito police, but that's yet another step. So my question here, just to get to the nub of that one, is I would like to have you just give some further thought as you bring this back for a final decision to approve this, once you have gotten a final term sheet, I will call it, from the chief in Albany, as to what the likely change in the response time might be in the event that you need to call in help. Because as you mentioned in your opening remarks here, one of the most important factors that you wanted to consider was officer safety. But of course, a second, if not equally important issue is the safety of the residents of this community, which you were sworn to serve. So if in fact there's going to be a delay in response time, I would like to know what your thoughts are on that. Secondly, and along those same lines, it was mentioned by Paul Haxo, who is on our finance committee, and I hadn't thought about this, but it was a very good comment, that it would be very useful to understand the dispatch response time between Albany, with their separate and very small dispatch center, Contra Costa County and their dispatch center, which by my calculations is at least 10 times, they handle at least 10 times the number of dispatch calls as the City of Albany. And the dispatch times that we were getting out of Richmond. And I say that because this morning, just thinking about that, I went on the Albany website and I looked, and they have a great website, and included on that website is a section where you can look under dispatch, and I would encourage people to look at that section, because in that section it references that the 6 people that are assigned to dispatch at Albany provide multiple functions, including they answer questions from people that come to the counter. Obviously, citizens of Albany, they have nothing to do with us, but we will be paying some of those costs. But my point here is that they are performing multiple functions, and one of the goals that the chief set forth for this particular calendar year was, and again, check it out for yourself, was that he wanted to try to, I can read it to you, but I'll paraphrase it. He wanted to work on improving the efficiencies of their dispatch service. He was apparently, you could read between the lines, that the dispatch time was not as satisfactory, I read, as he might like it to be. So I just throw that out. He's obviously concerned about dispatch, and if he's concerned about dispatch, we should be concerned about dispatch. Then the last thing that I would like to mention is this. In the letter that came from the Albany police chief, and is the only thing that I have indicating where Albany is coming down on this, was a reference to how the costs associated with their contract would increase over time. And what was said there was that the $59,000 that they are using, the $97,000 that they are using for their costs would increase by several factors. One of those factors is a cost of living not to be less than 4%. The other was that they would increase the cost based upon the salary and benefit increases that they pay to their personnel. And then there was an oblique reference to the fact that they might also include as a potential cost increase the amount of service calls that they are getting. In fact, again, on their website, they talk about the fact that they are concerned that their service calls have been increasing at a dramatic rate, indicating that they don't seem to have the staff to handle them. So I would like to get a much clearer understanding as to what the potential cost increases will be on a go-forward basis. But the last thing I just want to repeat on, to conclude on, is that we specifically recommended that it be that 2-year obligation. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Watt, in your statement, did I hear a couple of questions in there concerning whether or not the length of the border had any importance? And the response time from Albany PD?
Yeah, my point, of course, was that since we share such a much greater contiguous border with El Cerrito, it would seem reasonable to assume that the ability for El Cerrito police to come to our aid would be quicker than Albany. That was my...
Okay, let me attempt to answer those two questions. The length of the border, although he's factually correct that the length of the border is longer with El Cerrito and shorter with Albany, but it has no relevance as far as response time. Now, as far as the response time is concerned, he is correct also that you may have an Albany police office unit on the opposite end of Albany, away from Kensington, but Albany works like beats. Their officers are assigned beats. So there will be an officer assigned to the beat that's contiguous with Kensington. As Albany, as with El Cerrito, if there is an incident, either on San Pablo Avenue or west of the San Pablo Avenue, it may take all of their resources in order to deal with that incident. In that case, Kensington, as we do now, will either assist El Cerrito with that particular incident or take their police-related calls as they come into dispatch. I suspect that would be the same case with Albany. So the response times will be affected by those factors. But the only area of concern is how long it would take an Albany officer to become familiar with Kensington streets. So when he hears a street called Reed Place, and he doesn't know that the name of that street is taped on a metal pole that's a private driveway to two residents, that's just a simple matter. That's just a simple matter of getting those officers familiar with some of the streets that won't be so obvious on a map.
Could I just say something here? He asked a number of questions. I think his main point was to ask you to look into those things and perhaps report on them next time around. But as you do that, I thought I'd like to also add that how well each town is doing with police staffing is an issue. I understand El Cerrito is holding a few positions open because of their budget issues. I don't know what Albany's doing. Also, in our discussion, the Finance Committee last night, we had some discussion about dispatch response times. And you had some information on Albany, and you're going to get that from the county as well, correct?
That's correct. However, the information I got from Albany is confidential. That's why it's not printed on the website.
I see. Well, you could at least give us an opinion about whether
That I can do.
they're up to snuff in terms of response.
Well, and to clarify, dispatch times are state mandated. They must fall within certain parameters, or else they risk being penalized by the state. So,
Yeah, that's true, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to comply.
no, but Chief McQuiston of Albany did tell us that they were within their state-mandated dispatch times, so that there was no concern. I would, because I was not able to attend last evening, I do want to mention that I did attend the meeting on the 21st, 22nd, with Chief McQuiston in Albany, and he had stated at that time that he would prefer a 5-year contract, and I'll let the other board members know, as well as the public. I told him that for my own sake, I objected to that. That contract would tie up not only this board, but a future board in its entirety, and I was not comfortable with that length of contract. So we began to kind of generally speak, and I said 2 or 3 years. He would like, perhaps, be open to adding an extension to that would be of ease for either council district to approve. So that the 5-year contract was absolutely negotiable.
Yeah, we did discuss that issue last night, as Jim Watt mentioned, and part of the answer to that is an escape clause with a certain amount of notice. So there could be a structure where the contract is 5 years, but either party can terminate with a certain amount of notice, and that's kind of where we got to in our discussion last night. So that's not going to be, I don't think that's going to be a showstopper.
No, and we certainly discussed termination issues. He had initially said 90 days, and I said that was objectionable, even with cause, because it takes us at least 90 to 120 to have AT&T switch our 911 services over. So we were looking at a number closer to 120 days at minimal for notice with cause, up to a year perhaps without cause, to allow everyone to reflect changes. Matt, board comments? Oh, I'm sorry, Linda. Oh, please.
Stole all my thunder there, Len. Okay. The only thing I would like to do is have stability. I don't think you should set a contract up in a manner to contract out. That's the wrong way to look at a contract. The contract should provide stability in the delivery of services. So Len's idea of the 5-year contract, giving us stability in terms of pricing and in terms of expectations of services, and the advantage of the uptake of information on the way in which policing occurs in Kensington. It's a big, big advantage. I'm not objecting to an escape clause, if you will, but it should be forward for a nice, stable period of time so that we can get the monetary stability and the policing stability. Thank you.
Mabry Benson again. A point I forgot about my earlier comment, and I didn't remember it until I noticed. Thank you for having a date on, Mr. Hall, on your report tonight, because when I was trying to look at what was on the Finance Committee and what was given last month in the agenda, and then there was the revised one given at the meeting. None of those had dates on them, so it was hard to know if one of those was a revision, and I had to go over all the papers. So it would be nice if there were dates on these various reports, so we can immediately tell which version we're working on. I'm going to reiterate my support for, well, I think a 5-year contract is just unreasonable, although if it's done with the escape clause, okay, but I think you should try for a 2-year contract. And I think this is an extremely important point. It should be obvious to everybody in the community that we will be investigating contracting. And you know that I've asked you to get started on that. But before this dispatch issue came up, we had 2 very viable departments to consider who would make, in my mind, very good policing options, El Cerrito and Albany. By having these 2 options, we will have some leverage in these discussions or negotiations, whatever happens. By locking ourselves into a 5-year contract or even a 3-year contract, we will eliminate this valuable leverage. Because providing the dispatch is a very, you practically want to say that you're going with that department. And those are 2 separate things to evaluate. But there's also a couple of other matters that bother me about deciding to go first with Albany. Albany will not be on the same frequency as El Cerrito, as Mr. Ho mentioned. But since El Cerrito is our biggest common neighbor, far bigger than Albany, its officers will be able to respond more quickly than ones coming from Albany. Just trying to go up Marin to get to greater downtown Kensington versus coming up Mosier, which is a straight shot, and down the Arlington, it just looks to me like the response times from Albany are going to be shorter. Okay, I don't need to say this. Well, except I had heard that Albany dispatchers have some additional duties which do have the potential of distracting them from their dispatch duty. And I think the workload of the Albany dispatchers is a very important issue to get a good handle on. My other concern is, again, because El Cerrito is our biggest common neighbor, it's our primary reciprocal responder. And if the 2, us and El Cerrito, are not on the same frequency, we would not be constantly hearing the radio chatter of El Cerrito. Having to switch frequencies means you're just quite liable to lose that chatter. And the constant hearing of that chatter, I think, is very important because it would give both El Cerrito and us a heads up on what's happening and what might be coming down. And that information would give them a little bit of advantage in they would get them geared up for a faster response. And at some point, that could be a critical issue. And I guess this refers to Albany and, well, Jim didn't exactly ask this question, but do we have the data from the sheriff, both the sheriff and Albany, on the number of calls and the number of dispatchers, so you can get an idea of the dispatch to call ratio? Thank you.
Chief Hull, if right now, are we on the same radio channel with just El Cerrito?
Negative. We share a radio channel with El Cerrito, and San Pablo. So there's the three agencies, Kensington, El Cerrito, and San Pablo are on one radio channel, and it's dispatched out of the Richmond Police Department Dispatch Center.
And if we were to go with the sheriff, how many cities would we be on the same channel with?
The sheriff has said that they were going to create a West County channel that would be shared. I think it would be 6 or 7 different agencies.
So rather than just having 2 other cities that you're listening to, you'd be listening to 6 or 7?
That's correct.
Okay.
Dave Spath. One important element that you haven't talked about, but the chief did, is the fact that Albany is going to provide 24-hour service 7 days a week. And that means the CLETS system will be available during that period of time. With El Cerrito, it's only going to be 10 hours, ends at 6 o'clock. And talking to the chief last night, it certainly was obvious that you need that ability in those hours after 6 o'clock when you're probably going to have the potential for incidents. And so it strikes me as that is one of the more important issues, and it goes to both the safety of the officers and also the safety of victims out there. You had relayed information about searching for a youngster in the park who was lost after 6 o'clock. You would have no ability with El Cerrito to search that CLETS database or input into it. So that's a big impediment. Secondly, the sheriff's office is going to be taking on more dispatch requirements, so that means they're going to have to either hire more people to do that, and the sheriff's office, frankly, is one of the most expensive operations going. And you can look at the ad hoc report, and it describes very succinctly that the sheriff's office is an expensive proposition. So just like with Albany possibly providing salary increases to their dispatchers, I'm sure that the sheriff's office is going to be looking at providing salary increases to their dispatchers as well. And the workload is going to be greater, as you've just pointed out, and so what impact will that be? So if you're going to investigate these issues that Jim had mentioned, then you have to look at it across the board. As far as response time, I think that the chief has made a very important point, and that is, I think the response times are not going to matter too much in either case. A lot of it has to do with beats. If you look at the beat that El Cerrito has that is most contiguous to us, it carries all the way through the hills and down below. It's a very large beat that is only serviced by a small officer contingent. And so if you think that they are going to be any faster, let's say, than Albany is, then I would beg to differ on that. So anyways, I think Albany is a better choice overall, given the service. Yes, you can try to get a shorter contract, or have a contingency where you could divorce yourself from the contract within a certain period of time. But it seems to be very clear that Albany is the best choice for service going forward. Thank you.
Carl Quigger again. I voted for the 2-year cancellation after 2 years with 180-day notice. It can't be a short contract because the startup cost is just too high. Because if we want a short contract, then we ought not to be spending the upfront money. Once the money is spent, we are sort of committed for a reasonable period of time, and I think the 2-year cancellation is probably a very good option. So a very short contract with a huge startup cost, this doesn't make any sense to me.
So Carl, I'm confused. Are you saying that you don't want a 2-year contract? No, you do, no, but...
I am fine with what we did last night.
Okay.
But I heard someone say that we ought to be careful and have a short contract, which is okay, but we can't have the startup costs then. So if we go with Albany, it's got to be at least 2 years.
Oh, okay.
Because it wouldn't make sense otherwise to me.
Right.
All right.
Could I make a request to the chief? This response, there's 2 issues here. One is the dispatch response time when the call comes in. The other is the police response time to get to the target, right? And
I think there's, I think the dispatch response time, I think that's referring to ring times.
Yeah, I'm sorry, ring times.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for correcting me. So I think that, you know, to take apart this issue about are we going to get better service from Albany or the county on this issue, we need your police expertise. We heard a lot of opinion from the public, but you're the expert. I don't think you have any skin in the game one way or the other, so I would like next time around to get some kind of analysis from you about the ring time issue, county versus Albany, and the response time issue, El Cerrito versus Albany, what your opinion is and what you base it on, if you think you can do that.
Although I think that some of this is a little bit metaphorical and mathematically improbable. I mean, we are gauging response times for different incidents in different parts of Kensington with police officers in different locations. And not to circumvent any of the questions that have come up tonight because they're important, but Chief Hull has attended at least 3 meetings with each of these agencies, in addition to talking with El Cerrito Fire and Berkeley PD, and I really think that his recommendation is thoughtful, it is well-researched, and I'm quite comfortable this evening giving him the power to begin negotiation for a contract that will come back for final approval, with keeping these things in mind. Should anything egregious or unsettling come up, of course, we would like to reconsider, but I'm very comfortable giving him the authorization to do that. I don't know if
I am too. I just would like, some concerns were expressed here tonight. I know you've thought about these things. I know that you don't make your recommendation lightly, so just next time around, if you could fill in some of the blanks, I think to be helpful. That's all, but I'm prepared to take action tonight.
I mean, important questions that we want to answer for people so that they're comfortable.
I am just going to take one other aspect. If you make a 2-year contract and you have a huge startup cost, you're not going to be amortizing that cost at all. And then, if you go over to El Cerrito, whose contract will be expiring and they will be switching to a new system, you're going to have another huge bang in terms of a lot of money to switch to the new system. It doesn't make economic sense. The best thing is to take a look at a longer-term contract from a financial point of view, and also to provide stability. We've done too much shifting around in many respects. Witness tonight, we're also going to talk about shifting counsel again. This place doesn't have any stability, and we're talking about, well, let's have a 2-year contract so that if we want to contract out to somebody else, we're a district, we're a police district. Let's get the stability that we need here and keep our independent department and be financially sound.
Board member comments? Sorry, board member comments?
Sure, I'd like to just, again, thank Chief Hull and Vice President Tolley and Board President Sheriff Watt for the work they've done in researching this and speaking with various agencies, not all of whom made the final cut, but they did cast a wider net. I will be voting with the recommendation of both Chief Hull and the Finance Committee for the Albany option. I am particularly want to point out to people who don't know the history, Albany used to do dispatch for Kensington prior to the Richmond Consortium being set up. So in the 1980s, I don't know for how long they did that, but they did used to do dispatch. I don't know if you know how long it was, but.
I know why they stopped doing dispatch. I just want to say it was an issue of money. When the Richmond Consortium started up, it was cheaper for Kensington to move away from Albany to Richmond, and that was the reason why Kensington is no longer dispatched by Albany.
Right, so there were no other problems in that arrangement in prior years. I also believe that the software that Albany uses, which is called RIMS, is the trending software for law enforcement agencies and other public safety agencies to be going for. And so I am not comfortable sinking money into outdated technology that's on its way out, frankly. El Cerrito is going to be updating their software in 2 years. They have not committed to what they would do. They had been leaning toward RIMS. Now they've left themselves open for choosing again, but I don't think that that's a terrible, financial investment in outmoded, technology that's on its way out. And that has a lot of other problems. In addition, the Albany option provides IT support to us, which the other option does not, and that's very important for our small district. And there are other benefits that have been discussed previously around saving of staff time and effort in reconciling error reports on mandatory reporting of crime statistics. The current system is very cumbersome and takes approximately 10 hours per month of staff time to reconcile, whereas this new system can be done literally in a matter of minutes. And it highlights the errors for you when there are errors that are made. So there's a lot of reasons why I'll be voting in favor of the Albany option. I just wanted to enumerate a few of them for you. Thank you.
All right, shall we make a motion?
Sure.
Do you want to do?
By the way, I appreciate, that was a nice cogent explanation of why we should be going that way, in my view anyway. So I move that we commission the chief to negotiate with Albany. Following the recommendation of the Finance Committee last night, Lynn has the actual motion that was carried on that. And personally, I don't really care if it goes 5 years as long as you have that, was it 180-day escape clause? I think that's the important thing. And if we could exercise that option 180 days, exercise the notice option 180 days before the 2-year expiration date if we choose to, or go on to 5 years with that option. To me, a longer contract, potentially locking in a better rate is better for us than a short-term contract.
I will second the motion.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Before we, I just want to make sure Lynn got that. It was a lot of words. Okay. Okay, all right. Sorry, go ahead.
All right, all in favor?
Yes?
Aye. Opposed? Okay, the motion passes 4-0.
And I want to thank the board members, Rochelle and Eileen, for the work they did, and Chief Hull, what you've done is magnificent. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I do. We all are so thankful for the tremendous amount of work. This has been our #1 issue over the last 2 months, and I did a small fragment, and Eileen, Natoli, and Chief Hull were simply amazing. Day in and day out, they got updates on this. So thank you. So moving on to new business. The board will review, discuss, and possibly vote to accept the engagement letter from Ann Danforth and appoint Ann Danforth as district legal counsel. It's page 3. As you will know, we earlier this month concluded our relationship with Wendell Rosen, and the board has put in a proposal from Ms. Danforth, and she is here tonight. If she would like to introduce herself and speak a little bit to her experience, that would be lovely, not to put her on the spot, although I'm happy to reiterate her resume as well.
I did not prepare any remarks, but I'm happy to go off the cuff. As said before, my name's Ann Danforth. I've been an attorney now since 1983, so it's been a minute. For most of the last 20 years of my career, I was the town attorney for the town of Tiburon. I was their sole legal counsel, so I handled a full gamut of local government affairs. Before that, I spent 1.5 years with the city of San Jose, and before that, I was in the land use and local government group of McCutcheon, Doyle, Brown, and Anderson, which was a law firm that represented both developers and public agencies, largely in land use matters, but not solely. So that's a career. It's a long public agency career. It's included a lot of contracts, including public works contracts and labor contracts. It's included a number of different personnel items and, well, pretty much anything that can cross a public agency's desk. It's a kind of work that I enjoy. But after a long period of time of doing it, I decided to retire almost 2 years ago. And after 2 years of retirement, I've decided that I really would like to keep my hand in on a more regular basis, and so here I am tonight.
Questions from the public or comments? Questions or comments from board members? Oh, sorry, Linda, please.
My only question is that, as I understand it, and I checked with the State Bar, Attorney Danforth is not associated at this time with a firm, so there's not a deep bench. And since there's not a deep bench, in the event of litigation or specialty matters, it may be that we would be better off going with a larger firm. And I did want to ask you, I didn't know if you would be here tonight. In Googling attorney for Tiburon, I came across Benjamin Stock still listening. Is he still affiliated with Tiburon?
Shall I answer it?
Yeah, well,
I'll handle both those questions. So Ben Stock was my successor.
I see.
He's a good guy. He works for one of the major, Burke Sorensen, one of the major, of course, I apologize, for one of the major city attorney law firms. And he took over right after I left. As for the other issue you mentioned, that's a definite issue. I mean, remember, though, I was the sole attorney for the town of Tiburon, which had its fair share of litigation. It had slip and falls, it had workers' comp issues, it had other litigation issues. And the things I couldn't do, I contracted out to law firms. And that turned out to be cheaper, frankly, for the town of Tiburon than the current situation where they have a law firm doing their kind of ongoing general stuff in addition to the specialty stuff. So I fully anticipate that there will be certain items that I will have to contract out. But just having me doing the kind of day in, day out general advisory matters, I believe you will find cheaper in the long run, or even in the short run.
And also to answer your question, we maintain a relationship with Public Law Group, and they are amicable, as is Ms. Danforth, to working together should an issue arise. So,
Well, that's good, because there's quite a bit of uptake with a district like ours in terms of municipal memory, if you will. And one of the chief complaints of some of our more vocal, financially concerned citizens is the legal costs.
of course.
Paul Doro, Kensington resident. I was at the last meeting in which it was announced that Wendell Rosen was parting ways with the district as legal counsel. And so now here we are at the next meeting, and we have new legal counsel. And I have no quarrel at all with Attorney Danforth's qualifications, which appear to be substantial and eminent. But the process is quite opaque. And so I'm wondering, for example, were other candidates considered? How did Ms. Danforth come forth as a candidate for district general counsel? Just a little sunshine for our edification?
Yes. Well, two issues. One, we had a situation where we required counsel very quickly because while Public Law Group is working with us, they're not really prepared to take on the day-to-day issues that we need assistance with. Ms. Danforth was part of the previous pool of applicants and was very highly recommended. I believe Director Gillette at the time brought her to our attention, and the discussion in the board at the time was whether we would be going with an individual proprietor or a firm, and the majority at the time felt that an individual firm was the best way to go. So she had already been interviewed by a prior board who were enthusiastic about her qualifications, and we found that this was a very appropriate time to bring her on board.
It's me again. My interest, as it is most of the time, is financial again. And one of the things the Finance Committee looked at last night was the audit for ending June 30th in 2016, and we had spent $260-some thousand on attorney fees. I question whether this board needs to have an attorney at every meeting that we have. Now, I looked at the fee that the applicant is charging. I don't have any problem with the hourly rate, but when you think in terms of 2 board meetings a month, and you meet almost all the time at 6 o'clock in executive, so you start from 6 to 10, and if you do this twice a month, then the basic fee is sort of used up at that. So my concern is about whether we ought to have an attorney at every board meeting. The other thing that's sort of minor, and I always wonder in the financial and the legal fees, how much of that amount has to do with cost or additional items and all the things that get added beyond the dollar, beyond the hours. So I wish the board would consider to not have an attorney at every meeting, especially since we have 2 meetings a month.
Go ahead, please.
Any further comments from the public? Let me answer that first. I had a couple of other comments and suggestions. We've had this discussion with Ms. Danforth, Carl, and I think we all agreed in closed session, I think I can disclose this, that it would be good for her to attend the first, 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 meetings, whatever she needs to come up to speed on the unique. Sorry, what? Did you want to know about me? I certainly did. Yeah, that was the first thing out of my mouth, Carl. Watch out for him. He goes after those attorney's fees every single meeting. So we're finally trying to listen and do something about it here. So anyway, the plan was that she would attend the first several meetings, become familiar with our unique little town, and then hopefully we would not need her. And I think we all agreed that that's what we shoot for, is having the board be self-sufficient for the most part and handling these meetings without legal counsel being present. So we've had that discussion. I think we have a good plan to make sure we utilize her services in the most effective manner. Well, thank you for raising the issue. And I guess thank you for constantly criticizing us for the big attorney's fees. We need it. So a couple things came up in the Finance Committee last night, and I wanted to mention them. And I think what I'm going to suggest is that these are all minor things. And
I did email Ms. Danforth with these today because I was informed of them, so thank you.
So I thought maybe what we could do is, instead of voting to enter into this contract, we could vote to essentially empower you to enter into this contract with certain additions. You would negotiate with her, taking care of these little issues.
All right, perhaps we can.
And I'll say what they are, if I can remember them all. Let's see. One was, I have the notes somewhere, but go ahead, if you can
I
take
can
them off
read it
fast
from
and I
my
can.
email because I sent the email to Rochelle on the comments that people had. One was Linda Spath asked for a cap or else notice before any Westlaw fees exceeded a certain amount. And another was, I asked for having separate categories to address better how we're spending our legal fees, with normal administrative costs versus the police costs versus the non-police related litigation matters.
You mean categories in the billing, right?
Categories in the billing, right. And then I'm going to just go down to my email that I sent to Rochelle this morning, because it had all the people's comments in there.
And while you're doing that, there's a thing about billing us bi-monthly, and we were...
Right.
I had assumed that was twice a month, but somebody pointed out that probably technically that means once every 2 months. So I think we'd kind of like it twice a month, if possible, but...
Or would we, I'm happy with monthly billing. That's also fine.
Well, you can work it out with her.
Okay, all right.
Okay,
And-
so the other was Rob Furman and Paul Haxo asked for information on E&O insurance.
Actually, there is a provision there on page 4 of the agreement, disclosure regarding insurance. I looked that up. Attorney maintains professional liability insurance and will provide details upon request. So again, maybe we could put something in the contract in relation to that, more detail.
Yeah, and the last we've already talked about, it was the bi-monthly versus every 2 months or every 2 weeks, so, yeah.
I just, there was one issue that Jim Watt raised about making it clear that she's not an employee of the district, that this is an independent contractor kind of a relationship. So maybe, Ms. Danforth, you could just put a clause in there affirming that. I mean, and I had just one question on page 5. It says, beginning on January 1st, 2018, attorney's monthly retainer shall increase to $32.30, and the hourly rate shall increase to $190. The hourly rate increases $10 under that clause. But then it goes on to say that the retainer and hourly rate is subject to change on 30 days written notice to the district. So it seemed a little bit, and again, we don't need to work this out tonight, but Rochelle, I'd like you to have a conversation with her about that. Seems to me it might be nice if we had some sort of rate guarantee for some length of time, and then we switch to the monthly notice. And then further on down on page 5, item E, capital E, in the event the attorney is to provide the advisory services in any given month, attorney will so inform the board president as soon as practicable and provide a credit against the next monthly retainer payment for the hours not provided. I was a little unclear on the meaning of that, so just straighten that out.
When I initially prepared this contract, it was under the understanding that I'd be expected to attend 2 4-hour meetings every month, and that this seemed like the logical way to provide for a case where either the board might decide they didn't want me there, or for some reason I couldn't attend. Since I'm hearing a desire for significantly more flexibility as to whether or not I'm actually at meetings or not, which is fine with me, by the way, it might make sense to treat the monthly retainer a little differently, so that you get X number of hours for the retainer, and then there's a separate retainer that covers up to Y number of hours for meetings, and you just don't pay for the meetings you don't use, something like that. I think
Makes sense to me.
I think this structure doesn't work so well if you might decide, hey, we don't really need you next Thursday.
Actually, I'm wondering maybe,
We did modify it slightly from, we took before that there was only 4-hour attendance at the board meetings per month, and then moved some hours over. But if you want even more flexibility than that.
well, I was just actually the line, in the event the attorney is to provide the advisory services in any given month, attorney will so inform the board. Well, we would.
Sorry, it's unable, perhaps?
Okay, that's,
Okay.
it just seemed unclear to me, that's all.
Oh. But I think we should play with this a little. I did give the president an initial revision based on my understanding that you might only want me for 1 meeting a month, but now I'm hearing that you might not even want me for that, in which case I think I should restructure this a little bit so that we don't need to be constantly worrying about whether or not you're paying for more meeting hours than you're actually ever going to need.
Yeah, and, you know, the fact of the matter is, there are going to be some meetings where we're going to need to have you. It's just the way it is, but, you know, the average meeting where there's no, people aren't at each other's throats, you know, maybe we can get by without an attorney. So
Let us all hope.
I think it's all about flexibility, so I think we're very close, and if we could just, you know, nail that down in a final negotiation.
If you're comfortable, whatever the board is comfortable authorizing as a motion, then I am fine with that.
I am, and I'll make the motion.
Okay.
I move that we authorize President Sharis Watt to complete the negotiation of the contract with Attorney Ann Danforth, and I guess that's it.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Yes.
Opposed? None. The motion passes 4-0. We have new legal representation. Welcome aboard. Thank you so much. All right. right, that concludes this evening's meeting. Thank you for attendance. We meet again, I think it's April 13th.
I'll make a motion to adjourn. I did not forget. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second, oh, Glenn seconds. All in favor?
Aye.